Hey, welcome back to the channel, guys. Got some running video here of my latest build. This is kind of a project I've had going on for a couple weeks now, and it's a hoop crawler chassis that I got off of Amazon, and some other random parts I had from other builds. And I gotta say, it came out really nice, and I'm really impressed with it. So I'm gonna have a little build video. I'll show you guys a little more details coming up after this video. I just wanted to get out and run this to make sure it wasn't a pile of crap before I released a build video. So I have run this one other time, and I had a kind of a different setup, and it was a pile of crap, right? So I had a cliffhanger body on here, the cab only, and it was just a little too wide. I had to run different wheels and tires because they rubbed the front fenders. It had different sliders that came with this chassis that just did not work right. I had some 85 mil shocks on there, thinking that I wanted to go a little bit more like belly dragger, low CG style. And you could see from these conditions, with all these really steep breakovers and just chunky, rocky, bouldery kind of terrain, belly dragger just, it did not work for me in these conditions. Maybe it works for some guys. I could not make it 2 feet through this. It probably side hilled great in that configuration, but was horrible everywhere else. So kind of back to the drawing board with this, and I went back to, so this is running Capra axles that I stole off of my Capra, and it's running Capra shocks, which are 95 mil shocks. And it just works so much better. Maybe I give up a little bit in terms of ultimate like center of gravity settings, but it just, the amount of articulation just makes it work so much better in these conditions. So it's going to stay how it is for now, because this is what I kind of built it for, just running in this kind of environment. So Capra axles, 4-wheel steer, which is a huge benefit in these rocks too. And like I said, stock Capra shocks. Now I may end up changing up the shocks. I like them. They do tend to leak a little bit, and I do eventually want to rebuild my Capra, so maybe I'll throw these shocks back on there. But I don't know, if you guys found a solution for Capra shocks to keep them from leaking, let me know in the comments. But they're not horrible, but they do just lose a little bit of fluid. Each week I feel like I have to add a little bit to them, but not a huge deal. They do work really well, and they said the 95 mil length seems to work on these. I am running these little stretchy hair bands on the front just to kind of keep it pulled down a little bit, and I have the shot. They're stock springs, and I just have them, the preload collars wound out all the way, and seems to be okay. Maybe I could get away with a little bit softer spring, but pretty happy with it. So like I said, I'm going to go into more detail of the build, but I will kind of just go over some of it briefly here, because this is a fairly long video and I have time to talk. So yeah, Capra axles. I'm running a 2-low trans, also off of Amazon. I'll link everything up down below, and then I'll also link everything in the build video. But Amazon 2-low trans, that was like 36 bucks, and I gotta say, really impressed with the quality of this trans. It does have overdrive to the front. I think they labeled it as somewhere around 33%, so it seems to be the correct amount. I was happy with that. And my original intention with this was, I love my Capra, but I felt like it was always a little bit limited, just because it does have a slightly high center of gravity. The Capra was super capable up to a certain point, and then it would just get really tippy, right? And I think it's because the motor and trans, it's a big heavy trans in the Capra, and it does sit up kind of high. So I always I loved it, but I always found it to be a little bit frustrating, because it kind of reached its limit fairly abruptly. You'd be like, everything is great, this thing's amazing, and then all of a sudden, no, it just would not go any further, and you couldn't push it any further. It would just get kind of tippy. So I was like, you know what, let me take the axles, the 4-wheel steer and everything, and just see if I can build something kind of on a budget, right? So I started looking at different chassis kits available, and out of convenience I found this one on Amazon. I'll link it below. I forget what it was even advertised as far as the brand name, but when it showed up, it was packaged as a Who Crawler, H-O-O Crawler, and super impressed with the quality of the chassis. It's a 3.5 mil carbon chassis, made extremely well. The finish on it is really nice. It's nice stiff. I mean, everything precisely made, so super happy with that. And then the transmission actually showed up as a Who Crawler as well, if I remember correctly. I need to double check that one. I got a couple packages at the same time. But yeah, so the trans and the chassis, I think total was like, I think the chassis kit with the skid and sliders and everything was like $60, $63, something like that. The trans that comes with its own skid, a nice Delrin machine skid, that was like $36. So combined, it was under $100 for, you know, the chassis, the trans, the skid. It came with a little minimal like front bumper and then a couple cross braces. You know, it'll get you started, and nice quality and really good price. So out of convenience, it was on Amazon. I got it in a couple days. I decided to try it. So apparently the chassis is based off of, I guess loosely based off of an Element. Apparently it's a direct swap for any of the Element Enduro platforms, as far as like you could run the stock skid, so you can just swap the frame rails on an Element Enduro with this chassis kit, and it does have an angled skid, so you get a little bit of an advantage, and it's really nice. So I might even consider picking up some extra frame rails. Just the rails you can get even cheaper. I think you can pick those up for $40. I may just pick up another set of rails and throw them on my Gatekeeper. That's how much I like this chassis so far. You can see I get hung up here and there. I think it's a lot of just the line choice I'm choosing here. I got to get used to this rig, and also get used to just driving four-wheel steer again. You know, there's times where I'm just like, oh wait, you know, I should be steering the rear wheels the other way or whatever. But overall, super impressed with what this thing was capable of, and not really many issues. But yeah, getting back to the build, my original intention was, all right, I'll use my Capra axles, and I had a brand new Hobbywing Fusion Pro 2300. I was like, perfect. Those two things combined are the start of a really good build. But turns out when you run a two-low trans, it really limits your motor choices. And I ran into all sorts of clearance issues with that, because the motor sits so low, and it's a forward-facing motor, that with the bigger Fusion system, it's essentially the size of a 550 can. I ran into clearance issues where the motor was hitting the side of the chassis. I didn't have enough room to mount the suspension link on the inside of the chassis. The upper links in the front were hitting the front of the motor can. Just one issue after another. And I could make it work if I put spacers under the trans, but then I'm like, it doesn't make sense. I have a two-low trans. Everything about the build is trying to get the center of gravity lower, and then I have to put spacers to raise the heaviest part of the vehicle, the motor and trans, up 10 millimeters, and then I still had to compromise with link mounts and everything else. So I'm like, nope, this isn't the way to go. I ended up having to go with a Outrunner motor, so I picked up a Rhino 80 amp ESC and a Rhino Outrunner motor. I forget the exact model that I went with, but I think it's like a 2050 kV. I'll have more details in the build video, but I'm really glad I did, because it solved every problem. I had so much more clearance around the motor, and just, yeah, I had to find a spot to mount the ESC, but it's kind of a minimal size ESC, so not a huge deal. And I'm really happy with the performance. It worked phenomenally. I had to revise a couple settings because I was getting some heat buildup in the motor. But I went online, checked a few of the comments on some of the reviews, and one guy had some good settings that he used to reduce the heat, and I did the same thing, and I'll cover more of that in a future video. But really happy I went this direction. The Outrunner is awesome. I'm running it on 3S in this video, just a little 1300 pack 3S, and really happy. I forget what gearing. I think I'm running like 14 tooth pinion in here. And yeah, happy with the wheel speed. I may try, it is 4S capable, I may try 4S just to get a little bit more of a punch and higher wheel speed. Certain situations I think it could benefit from that, but overall really happy with that. You'll see the sliders I have on here. Oh, well, let's talk about the rest of the chassis too first before I get into the sliders. The links, again, trying to do this on a budget. I just picked up, I think they're RC Lions high clearance links off of Amazon. They were like 16 bucks and they fit really nice, and all the link geometry ended up working out nice, and it handles well. I may play around with some anti-squat in the back, just lowering the upper link mount on the front chassis. There's a decent amount of options on this chassis for link mount, so I want to play around with that. But yeah, so I mean, you can't go wrong for 16 bucks. I actually bought 2 different link sets just to see, one for like a slightly longer wheelbase, just to see what I ended up using. And then the sliders I actually made out of Kydex, and Kydex is a heat moldable plastic sheet that you can order, different thicknesses. You can get all different graphic designs that are impregnated into the plastic, and I am planning on doing a video on strictly on working with Kydex on RC vehicles, because at this point I have a bunch of stuff that I've made with this material, and it's really easy to work with, and it's really cool. It's just perfect for this type of a build, because you can make sliders out of it. You can make little ESC mounts, battery mounts. You can make a lot of stuff easily, and it's easy to work with, and it's pretty cheap. So I want to do a little video on just tips and tricks for working with Kydex. So look for that too in the future. And subscribe if you want to get notifications and stuff like that if you want to see future videos. But anyway, really happy with the sliders on here. I did more of a high clearance, almost like a boat side type slider, to really get the most amount of clearance as possible, and to protect the body. I did kind of like a full length slider on here, and I think it came out really nice. But so overall, I will say this: if you want to try to tackle a custom build, and I'm not even talking like a kit that you can get, like a VRD carbon kit or something, you know, everything is kind of figured out for you. So there's a pretty good chance you can kind of just see what guys are running and just follow that, you know, as far as like your build. But if you're going to just try to really do a full custom build and just piece things together, my recommendation is to buy more than you think you need, just to have a lot of different options during the build. Or you really have to do it step by step and just carefully measure things and figure out what's going to work and what's not going to work. Because I would have known if I had just assembled this whole chassis and then looked at the placement for the motor, I think I would have known that the Fusion Pro would not work. And if I didn't have one already, I wouldn't have bought that, you know, so I would have ultimately saved money. But I ended up using the Fusion Pro in my latest Red Cat Gen 9, so it all works out. But it ends up being one of those things of like, you have leftover parts, and then you're like, oh, well, now I have this extra motor. Oh, now I'm going to build something else. And which, you know, it just leads into, you know, a chain reaction of just spending more money and building RCs, which is cool. You know, it's inevitable anyway. But, you know, if my initial intention was, oh, let's try to do a budget build, you know, I kind of failed at that, because I ended up having to buy, you know, another motor and ESC and different bodies. So it ended up costing me probably another $200 that I didn't originally plan on. So, but like I said, now I have a cliffhanger body, which I also bought a nice 3D printed interior with a roll cage for. I just kind of jumped the gun on that one. So now I have that body and interior and some other parts. So it's, you know, I'm eventually going to end up building another rig, which is fine, but, you know, didn't really work out like I initially planned. So yeah, my advice would be either do it step by step by step and really kind of look closely at what you're dealing with, or to just buy a couple options. And then that's what's nice about getting things on Amazon, is the returns are easy, you know. So I bought, you know, 2 link kits, and the one I didn't use I could return. I ended up keeping it anyway because I know I'm going to use some of this stuff. But But yeah, if you buy a couple things and whatever you don't end up using, just return it. The shocks that I tried on here, the 85 mils, they were off Amazon, and they didn't work out at all for this build, so I returned them. So, you know, things like that. So you can try a couple different options. You know, you can pick up a 3-gear trans and a 2-low and just see which one is going to fit. You know, sometimes when you just have them in your hand and you just set it on the vehicle, you'll know right away, like, oh no, this isn't going to work. You know, it's hard to envision a lot of this stuff before you actually build it. You know, if you have the axles, the links, and the chassis and skid, a lot of times you assemble that, slap some wheels on there, and you'll have a really good idea of where you should go with that build. Certain things will jump out at you and say like, oh man, I don't have enough room for this body. But anyway, I'm getting to the end of the video, guys, here, so stay tuned if you want to see more. Yeah, and thanks. Later.